All right, good morning, everyone. We will go ahead and call the meeting to order. Great to see everyone. Beginning of a new session or a season or fiscal year, an academic year, whatever relates best to you. Please accept my welcome. Hope the semester is going well for everybody and appreciate you being here today. All right, we will begin with old business. First of all, would ask for any discussion related to the minutes of the Fiscal Affairs and Audit Committee from June 14th, 2023. I know Regent Parasker and I were not present, so I would defer to Regent Winter or Regent Dicus if there's any discussion. If not, we've got a motion to accept.
And I second it.
Second by Regent Winter. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, we've also got an agenda item for follow-up questions related to our agenda call from a couple of weeks ago. I didn't have any questions that were raised. Any that you're aware of, Elaine? No. Okay. All right. We'll move on into new business. Finalize and adopt committee organization, agenda, and work plan. Elaine Frisbee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, before you have a copy, we have a packet of items, including the minutes of last June's meeting. The second document is our amended organization, agenda topics, and work plan for the coming year. We discussed this back in early August when we were at K-State Olathe. The change that has been made since that time is to remove the dates that we had scheduled for the month of October. As we now understand, there is not to be a board meeting when we're at the University of Kansas. So we have moved the few items that we had scheduled for fiscal affairs from October to November, which is when we normally do those items anyway. So really doesn't seem disruptive to our schedule in any way. Our agenda topics there are noted at the top of the second page, and then our month-by-month plan for the year. And then the last page gives you the contacts from each of the state universities and our friends at Washburn and our student government liaisons. And then I also will add then the faculty senate liaisons now that I've been given those. And I will send that information to you. So we have adopted the Tuesday, roughly 2 weeks ahead of the board meeting as our time for our agenda calls at 12:15. We'll have the same Zoom link each month, and that's noted on the handout.
All right, thank you, Elaine. Any questions related to that item? Okay, if not, we'd entertain a motion to approve. Okay, motion by Regent Winter, second. Second by Regent Parasker. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you for your work on that, Elaine. Staff overview of board policies relevant to the committee.
All right, the next item in your packet, Regents, is a very brief outline of the sections of the board policy manual that are relevant to your committee. The updated version of the policy manual is posted on our website with the link there under our resources section of our website. Chapter 1, it's separated into 3 chapters. Chapter 1 is very specific to the board itself with the committees and identifying the committees and assignments, as well as operations of our agency, the board office. Chapter 2 then has many policies related to the state universities and your governance role for those universities. The first 3 sections relate more to the universities themselves, academic affairs, the students, the CEO, and then you get to the important sections for this committee. So section D within chapter 2 gets into those fiscal and business administrative rules that the universities must follow for things like how you set tuition, how they are requested, how we go about the unified state appropriations request we'll talk about later this morning, federal funds, crowdfunding, how the universities must do their financial reporting. The state agency, they are state agencies. They are universities, but they're also state agencies. So they have obligations to be incorporated within the state's financial audit and state's financial report. They have to do additional conflict of interest reporting to us anytime there is a change in CEO or every 8 years. there is an external management review of each of the universities to verify that for control of non-state funds that we have adequate oversight and there's adequate conflict of interest reporting. We're not scheduled to have any of those this year, but we had 1 or 2 last year and several in the year before that. We keep track of that schedule. Each university must designate a single CFO. We have policy on financial reserves universities must maintain and how they report that. Their affiliated corporations, their auxiliaries, their service clearing activities, how they must seek contracts. They must notify our office when they engage in a contract over a certain dollar amount, $1 million. And when they seek capital financing, there are policies related to the parameters within which they must seek debt financing. We're going to talk about that this morning as well. And if they wish to refund a bond, if it's an advantageous time to do that, the parameters, the conditions that must be met in order to do that. We do have a statute also in section 15 within that chapter that allows, there's a statute that allows the state universities some relief from the state's procurement rules. That does not extend to our agency, but does extend to the state universities. So with that, relief from state process means that the board has its own policies to ensure compliance with the board's guiding principles. There's a whole section on purchasing insurance. The state universities have statutory authority to procure insurance other than for state employee health, which is a whole other section that state agencies were in the state employee health system. We do purchase property insurance as a system. We also procure cybersecurity insurance coverage, which is a rapidly changing market. Interesting events going on there. But we had success as a result of those purchasing as a system. We get to earn some benefits there financially. What must happen when they want to dispose of surplus property? We gained relief from the legislature 2 years ago for when the legislature would not have to approve every single divestment of a property. It used to be, you have to go every time the legislature you want to get rid of obsolete property. Now the board has purview over that. There's discussion of the Faculty of Distinction program, their sponsored research overhead, when they do refunds from their fees, restricted party screening, and then restricted materials related to their facilities. And of course, the next big section then is the facilities section, E, within chapter 2. This was a section of the board policy manual that was completely reworked. I like to call it as we took it down to the studs and then we completely redid it back in June of 2021. And we are seeking some changes and update. Some might consider it rather technical, consistent with the board's request last year for capital project approval limits. As state agencies, there's a whole, just like with procurement, there's a whole sequence of things that must happen when a university wants to make an improvement or a renovation or build a new building on state property. So we have policies on campus master plans and when those must be updated and submitted and presented to the board. When a project is under a certain limit, it's considered a small project. And when it's over a certain limit, it's considered a large project. If we submitted every single project that our universities do in a year through the typical capital budget process, the Department of Administration and the Division of Budget and Legislative Research would be inundated. There would be no time to do any other consideration. There's so many projects going on at the campuses. So only large scale projects go through that process. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about the policy change. Section 4, very important, also created the new maintenance assessment. The expectation is over a series of years, the universities would start devoting a larger and larger share of their resource to taking care of the buildings that they have. That applies to mission critical facilities. And that maintenance assessment is calculated as a percentage of the value of the facility. Industry best practice would be to get to at least 2% of the building's value. And so we're working our way to get there. Section 5, also important for our processes. We will collect, and we are collecting vast amounts of information on all the facilities and how the capital renewal initiative is going. So there's a whole section on reporting. There is a separate section due to the statute that's cited there. Energy conservation measures have their own entire other approval sequence. And then we have the new language in section 7 for obsolete buildings related to the new legislation that the board sought when we want to retire or get rid of a piece of property. With capital projects, you're going to have necessary inspections. So we have policy on when the fire marshal and department administration and other inspections required by law, maybe boilers and elevators are also part of our policy. Private housing. When we have a situation like at the University of Kansas this year, where we have more students demanding on-campus living than we have space for, the university must come to the board to seek approval for the university to engage with local housing, private housing. So that happened at KU back in May and June. More reports due to the board, anything related to land transactions. We have cases sometimes where university is leasing space to a third party. Sometimes a university leases space, the third party is leasing space from the university. We have other land transactions. We have sales and easements and what happens when you want to acquire real property. All of those types of transactions are noted in section 11. 12, if a university wants to give a name to a building or a facility or a campus or an area, if there's a name, a person's name to be designated, there are rules for how the university seeks that approval. We have a few of those on this month's board agenda. Parking on a university campus, some of the most challenging and important things for our colleagues at the campuses. So we have parking and traffic rules policies. When the legislature adopted allowance for weapons to be on campuses, we had to adopt policy for that. And then the availability of campus grounds and facilities, and then where we have consumption, service, and sale of alcohol in non-classroom areas, we have policy on that. Also related to this section under chapter 3. So chapter 2 is related to our state universities. Chapter 3 relates more to our coordinated institutions. And really the only portion of that section related to fiscal affairs is the state's unified appropriations request. Most of that chapter 3 relates more to the academic transfer and articulation rules that BASC oversees. But when the board adopts a unified state appropriations request, they are doing that on behalf of the entirety of the system, not only the state universities. So that just ties that in for us. That's really the sections of the board policy manual. We'd be happy to print out a full copy of the policy manual for anybody who wants one. I don't know if there are any questions.
A couple questions on the facility side of thing. And you said maybe we'll get to it later. In 2021, on the last sentence of the opening paragraph, that any capital project or real estate transaction must comply with state law regardless of funding source. Having been involved with a facility at one point that the funding was all private, there was a lot of conversation. It would be much quicker if it could all come through private funds instead of state funds. How would this change have impacted that? Is that more into the architectural things that would have taken the additional time?
I'd almost want to defer that question to Director Bristow, if you want to come to the mic, and while Chad is coming to the mic to respond, because he lives in that world far more so than I do. I'm guessing the reference is with the private, the entirety of being private funding, the bidding requirements can vary, but the seeking bid still is the standard.
Regent Dicus, could you just restate that part of the policy, and I can try to.
I mean, the question I have, it kind of looks like it changed in 2021 that regardless of funding source, it still had to go through the state process. I just recall a building at one time that their whole goal was to get it privately funded, because then the process and time frame to from start to finish would be much quicker. because it wouldn't have to go through the state process. And so I didn't know whether that changed with this rule.
That was not the intent. And I'll look at more closely at that portion of the
Let me
policy.
interrupt right there. So I just want to clarify that aspect of the compliance with state law did not change in 2021. That's always been the case.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I'll just speak generally. Absolutely, to your point, there are statutes that guide, non-state money funded projects through alternative delivery processes. And that's for procuring the, professional design consultants as well as the construction services. With respect to all the other statutes that probably are, when I look more closely at that, those are just the other bevy of statutes that require compliance in terms of occupancy, code review, all of those things. And in that case, I'm not sure if that's a funding portion. I can look back into that more closely and try to clarify in more detail for you.
Just curious, I mean, based on a past experience and whether this changed that or not.
No. There are procedures for utilizing, processes that guide how a project works for non-state money funded projects, and that remains.
Okay. And then the other question I had on the, under facilities, under naming of buildings. I know we do that right at the end of the process, with funding sources. A lot of times that could be a part of the negotiation on a private source of funds, that a naming opportunity would come along with that. Do we have the cart and the horse? I mean, is that something we should consider? At least being made aware of in the earlier process than at the end?
The only thing I would say to that is that the naming of a facility is completely the purview of the board and not the institution.
Right.
So that should
But
always
I
be
guess the
clear.
institution's more than likely negotiated it as part of a fundraising effort, that there would be a naming opportunity with that. Which then the naming opportunity comes right near the end
Mhm.
or at the end. Yeah, and I mean, we haven't, in my year, we haven't not approved a naming opportunity, but the fact that it does come before the board, that possibility is there. I don't know whether universities have an issue in raising funds from private sources, where they're promising or alluding that a naming opportunity will come with that.
That's certainly something we could
That
talk with the
We're at the
leadership.
end of the process. It could be pulled at any point.
We could certainly talk to the leadership of the foundations, the endowment, to see what their take is on that, whether the naming of the facility,
Whether they're-
where that policy lies, and if that's really working well for them.
Okay,
There's an advantage to changing that. We can look into that.
And to further Regent Dykas's point, as expeditiously as we can bring that to the board for approval and consideration, I think would be good, because we would certainly hate to cost one of our institutions a commitment just waiting on board approval. So I would agree with that. Thanks, Chad. Appreciate it. Any other questions related to the board policy revisions as presented by Elaine?
I have a quick.
Regent Presker?
On the cybersecurity insurance coverage, that's fantastic, absolutely needed. But I do want to understand, did we have feedback from the insurance provider if we can do a better job in fixing any possible threats within the organizations? And can we get better so that the insurance requirement reduces? So it's a journey we take with them. They go and assess our systems and give threat indications. Is that done? And I'm assuming it is, but is there anything that we have, like best practices that we can take out of it?
Jeff can come up to the mic and I can just weigh in a little bit. Our Council of Business Officers and our Region's IT Council work on this discussion nearly constantly. And we work through an insurance broker who goes out for bid to help us get the best deal. part of the reason the requests you see in the budget are for IT funding is to fortify our networks against those very attacks. And I think we had a successful fending off of something at Wichita State. Is that correct? Recently, we had an attack and it was helped by some of that state funding that we had gotten. So that is a consideration, and each in campus is working together. We're doing penetration testing this year, and that includes our office as well, to improve our ability to fend those off.
We work, Regent, we work with our broker, and we go through a large survey of what we could do to get a lower insurance cost. And we also engage with our regular insurance provider and our cyber insurance provider and recommendations they make that we can do to protect our system. So we are very interactive with our insurance provider and with our broker to do the things I think that you're alluding to, because we're not the experts in all this, and they are providing the insurance and see the experience in the field. So we do have that interaction through our office. Our chief risk officer does that, and we consult together at Kobo on things that each of us can do. And we've done a lot from last year, which made us get us a better bid this year. And Gallagher is our broker who engages in that heavily with us as well.
Regent Winter, did you have a question earlier?
Yes, Elaine.
Just by way of quick summary, what one or two revisions to the policies are the most important or significant in your opinion? Are there revisions, and they just went over, are there any of these that are revised recently?
I would say the most impactful revision would be the complete workover of the facilities section that was done in support of the capital renewal initiative to try to attack our deferred maintenance backlog. That will probably be the most transformative thing for our campuses, our state universities. And just thinking through the land transactions piece that preceded the capital renewal initiative, we had some new complications from innovations at our campuses with interacting with third parties, bringing third parties onto the campuses, which has been incredibly helpful for recruiting students, but creates complications for how do we make sure we have enough policy and oversight for the board, but still make sure that those things happen as they should.
Any of those or any other other parts of this, were they controversial? Did you get any pushbacks from the institutions that are remarkable?
I'm sure that the CFOs would say there is concern over the escalation of the maintenance assessment. That's going to grow, especially I think there's a big jump in the dollar impact when we get to 2028. That would probably be, I don't know, the most concerning. I see heads nodding. So that's probably the most challenging from a fiscal standpoint. Most of the board policies, though, that you see here noted have been in place for a long time, and they're longstanding in that the legislature delegated certain oversight to the board, appropriately so, because you are the ones most heavily involved in the operation of working with the CEOs and the campuses. And so that's why you see all these detailed items here in sections E and F in chapter 2, or D and E, sorry.
Thank you. By the way, I too share the concern for, is it 2028, where an immovable object may meet an irresistible force. We'll see what happens.
Any other questions from committee members? Great work, Elaine.
Thank you.
If not, we'd entertain a motion to approve. Okay, motion by Regent Dicus,
Second.
second by Regent Winter. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, we'll move now to board agenda items under fiscal affairs. If the committee will indulge me, I want to switch the order up just a little bit so that we have a couple of items. Obviously, the most amount of time will be spent discussing the budget request. But we do have a couple of other items that we need to make sure that we leave time for. So if you don't mind, we will skip over the board request, the budget request for just a moment and move to Chad. We'll need to act on the policy amendment for capital project approval limits. Are you handling that for us, Chad?
Thank you, Chair Benson. So this is discussion item number 2 under facilities and an extension of the conversation that we just had about policy. This request to update the capital project approval limits in board policy will complement legislation that was enacted this past July to increase what constitutes a large capital project, now estimated at construction costs of $1.5 million or greater. And so you'll see on page 100 of the board book in the diagrams, the proposed framework for delegated authority for approval at different cost ranges is outlined here. And so you'll see, and the prior page shows what the current policy is, but effectively the lowest tier of delegated approval would be at the university CEO level. And that would be approving projects used to be under $250,000. We would propose raising that to 500,000 or less. The what we would call small capital projects being under 1.5 million now, large capital being over. We have a mid-tier, if you will. And that what we would propose is the board president and CEO, Dr. Flanders, would approve projects between 500,000 and up to $1.5 million. Though that process for that is typically that the universities submit that to the board office. I'll review, work with them, establish any details that we need to provide, and then make a recommendation to Dr. Flanders. And that approval happens, by memorandum, signed memorandum at that level. And then over 1.5 million, or I should say 1.5 million or over, we kind of have a shorthand in the diagram, but in the language of the policy, you can see that the very specific details are lined out. That would be approved by the full board. And those projects, as Elaine mentioned earlier, those large capital projects also populate the 5-year plans for the university. So when we see the 5-year capital plan, those are only projects that are large capital projects. So there's only one other piece on 101 that basically takes the same cost threshold and applies it to how professional services are procured.
Good explanation. It's pretty straightforward. Any discussion from committee members?
I just had a quick question. Do you have a percentage of distribution on the projects being in different ranges for the past maybe a year?
Regent Prasker, so you're saying a proportion of projects at each tier. I don't have top of mind. I will say this: we are producing information to go in front of the Joint Committee on State Building Construction, and we do at that time populate a takeaway handout that proportionalizes some of that. So I could provide that either from last year, follow up with you, or I could wait here in a couple of weeks and give you our newest version of that.
I can wait.
Okay, very good. I'll follow up.
Regent Dykes.
Would be kind of on my questions over the last year been more toward giving authority to the universities. Are we moving a needle here? Or is it really 250,000 for a construction project at a university? Doesn't seem like there's going to be many in there. Yeah. I don't know. Are you guys comfortable with these changes? Okay.
And I do think, for Regent Prasker's point, I think you will see the proportion of the projects that many more projects under that amount than reach the 5-year plan. So it's kind of a pyramid, so to speak. I would describe the distribution.
Any other questions for Chad on this item? Okay. If not, would entertain a motion to approve.
I would approve.
Regent Parasker. Second, Regent Dykes. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Motion approves. Thank you, Chad. And yes,
Would you like
yes,
to
ma'am.
back up to the consent agenda? Is there anything?
Oh, My apologies. Yes, we have the consent agenda as well that will need to come before the committee. Anything to add?
I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if there were any questions. Most of these items are capital items. The first one is the WSU mill levy. Just as a reminder, this is a remnant from their history as a prior municipal university. They do benefit from several $1 million in property tax in Sedgwick County. And so they, by state law, you must approve their budget. And then we have the whole series of capital projects starting on page 55 over to 58. And in your action this afternoon to approve the consent agenda, you would be then approving those projects.
Thank you, Elaine. Any discussion from committee members? Okay, would entertain a motion to approve. Regent Dicus,
I'll second it.
seconded by Regent Parasker. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries. All right, thank you for that, Elaine. And we will need to consider amending the other facility related request from Emporia State.
Yes, then on page 103, we have the item on discussion agenda. There are several aspects to this project. And noting, you can see in just the title itself at the top of page 103, and Bill McKernan is here with Diana Coleman to answer any questions. I don't know if you are seeking any comments about this project. We also have a representative from KDFA here as well.
Okay. Any discussion from committee members? Okay, would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Regent Parasker. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, is that all the one more?
Sorry, one more.
Okay.
And this was actually emailed to you. You will not find the data on page 114. This is a more unusual item, and this is what I would hope would be the only item that would be presented for financial that we don't have available at the time of publication. The Excel and CTE initiative on page 114. The Tech Ed Authority met yesterday on Zoom for a special meeting to approve the amounts in the tables that were sent to you by email, and you will have a hard copy in front of you tomorrow morning.
Okay.
The amounts are for last year's enrollments of high school students enrolled in technical programs at our two-year colleges. We did exceed the amount of what we normally have appropriated, but we have prior years carryover to take care of us this year. So we have adequate funding there. It also covers people in the AOK to Work program who are seeking a GED and getting a technical certification at the same time. So if they're in the qualified program, the institution gets funding for that. And there's several $100,000 for that program. We will be asking your approval for those amounts as well. And the third program is the GED Accelerator. That's an incentive for the schools, for the two-year schools. It does not have as much expense. The amounts that the schools get are designated in statutes. And when a student is seeking their GED at the same time as they're getting their technical certification, the school gets an incentive for that. We actually do not have enough funding this year for the amounts by statute. So we simply prorated the amounts down. We're short, instead of having 80-some thousand, we've only got 60-some $1,000. I don't remember the exact amounts. So the Tech Ed Authority approved those amounts that I sent to you the other evening. So we'll be covering that tomorrow in tomorrow's meeting.
Okay. Yes, Regent Winter.
What's the source of the carryover? Why is there a carryover?
Sure. We had fewer enrollments, largely the result of COVID. So we just had fewer students, but we still had level funding from the state. It's probably our most popular, politically popular program we have. And the legislature did not reduce funding for the program, even as enrollments were declining. And so that money built up, and it's to the good because now we're going to need to tap into it this year.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
Good question. Any other questions or discussion related to that item? Okay. We ready for budget discussion?
Yes.
Fun stuff, right?
Yes. And I would just note for the members, also in your packet is a little bit of an expanded narrative related to the items that coincides somewhat in order with the issue paper in your materials, starting on page 90.
Thank you for that. And did want to say in the beginning, just thank you so much to Elaine and your team, and also President Flanders. Thank you to all the institutions and the financial officers and your CEOs as well. I know a lot of work has gone into your request, a lot of conversations that probably were continuing right up until we started the meeting here today. So I know those are ongoing conversations. I also just wanted to say thank you to the institutions, because we can tie every single one of these budget requests back to the strategic plan and one of those pillars. And really the overall goal of strengthening the talent pipeline for our state. That being said, as is usually the case, our needs outweigh our resources. And I think it's important to remember that we have an obligation to put forward a budget that best advances our strategic plan while also submitting a dollar amount that is realistic and reasonable. I believe last year's budget, correct me if I'm wrong, Elaine, was about 253 million.
The amount of the addition, yes.
Correct, was about 253 million. And right now our requests are north of that. I'll say that. So as we go through these, I'll encourage my colleagues on the committee to think about how we prioritize and how we measure the ROI on these items, and certainly the institutions, if you can help us with that, it would be greatly appreciated. So really from a process and a housekeeping standpoint, what I'll do is I'll ask Lane, first of all, to answer any questions. Obviously, we received this information in advance. Have Elaine answer questions related to the system ask. And then I'll have the institutions send a representative to come forward and answer questions from committee members related to their ask. I want to leave plenty of time for committee members to be able to discuss where you see the priorities. And if you want to get into recommended amounts, that's fine as well. But I want to try to leave, because we're out of here at 11:45 roughly. I want to try to leave as much as half an hour for committee members to be able to see if we can reach some consensus on areas that we would like to see definitely put into next year's budget. If there are any of those that you're not comfortable with, or you want to ask questions maybe about phasing in over multiple years, I want to leave plenty of time for that. I don't want to set the expectation that we have to leave this room with an ironclad budget that we would present to the full board this afternoon. I don't know that that's possible, but obviously if there are areas of consensus that we can share with the full board as they begin this discussion later on this afternoon, I know they would appreciate that. And in visiting with Chair Rolfe, his plan is for the board to begin discussing this afternoon, but not to take action on it until tomorrow, because obviously there's a lot to take in. So we'll have the discussion this afternoon, let it marinate overnight, and then come back and take formal action on Thursday. So any questions related to the process, Regent Dicus?
So if I look at pages 92 through 97, those numbers total 629 million.
A little more than 253, isn't it?
Well, not exactly, Regent Dicus, because there are some items, especially for the 2-year sector, that are duplicates of one another. So it's like an array of choices.
Okay.
Like for the IT cybersecurity funding for the 2-year schools, would you go with what the Tech Ed Authority recommends, 6.5 million, or what the community colleges recommends, 13 million? So that, yes, but yes,
That doesn't save a whole lot.
it does not.
Every little bit helps. Yeah.
Every little bit helps.
Yes.
Regent Winter.
Thank you. I want to go back, Elaine, to I see this document here. It says system-wide SGF request allocations.
Mhm.
In the past, I remember seeing a one-pager with respect to all of the budget request items arrayed against past few fiscal years. Do we have that? I see the one that's multi-pages, page 90 through 95. But is there one on one page?
Not yet, Regent Winter. So what this was trying to attempt to give you is some context. So if we're asking for 400 million or 200 million or 600 million, what is that being added to? And for fiscal year 2025, the coming fiscal year, we're now in 2024, we have been allocated by the Division of Budget $1.045 billion. And so whatever beyond that, that the board wants to seek from the legislature and the governor, that would be beyond that as an enhancement in the budget process.
So the 1.04, all right,
Mhm.
reading very well. 1.045, that's the total appropriated for this fiscal year.
Actually, it's 1.15 billion. So if you look at the next column to the left, we were appropriated by the 2023 legislature $1.15 billion.
Okay,
What happened there between that 1.15 and the 1.045, Division of the Budget went through and decided some of those items that were appropriated in 2024, we consider those one time and not to be recurring. So they were removed. That was about $110 million that was removed from our base. So some of those items, many of those items show up in your list here in the issue paper. And as we proceed through this whole process, I call it the Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and Baby Bear versions of the budget. What you have here in the expanded narrative, that's the Mama Bear version. That's that medium version where you get some sense for the amount of the item and what it's for. We have the Papa Bear version in our budget narrative, which is dozens and dozens of pages and enormous amounts of detail. There's basically one person in the world that looks at that, and that's our budget analyst. And then there's the one-page version which is something we would use with a governor or legislators and for regents to have as a handout. And we haven't quite gotten to that point. We didn't try to map that onto this page as well, but we certainly can.
okay, so you're directing me and all of us to the 1.150 number.
Mhm.
What is the total budget request for this upcoming fiscal year? I'm looking for apples to apples.
Sure.
We have 1.150. How much are we asking for this coming year?
In total, with the many of the one-time capital project items, my total comes to $571 million. As you see it in the table on pages 92 and on.
Okay, just succeeded in confusing me more. I'm looking at a comparison to the 1.150 number that's in the second to the last column.
Mhm.
And so you just told me 571 million.
Mhm.
That's not.
So you would add,
That can't be.
you would add $571 million to that.
Okay, so
1,045,000,000
Mhm.
800.
So the additional, thank you, the additional request beyond what was allocated this year is $571 million.
Mhm.
And the percentage, what does that represent in terms of a percentage of increase?
In excess of 50%.
Okay. Let me see if I can ask a question that has a short answer. I'm burdened by past experience, and my past experience goes back 30 years on the Ways and Means Committee. And as I recall back then, the governor's office, the budget office would send budget directives
Yes.
to all the agencies. Included in those was, back then the agencies had to submit 3 different levels of budget request. As I recall, maybe one of them was
A,
some
B,
kind
and
of
C.
reduction, A, B, and C,
Mhm.
some kind of cut, and a B maybe, or whatever it was a little bit of increase, maybe a freeze, and then C was more of a wish list.
Yes.
Is that still done?
So the process now, somewhere in the 1990s, and I couldn't tell you exactly what year it was, the budget office eliminated the concept of A, B, and C. And there have certainly been times where the budget division is who sets the rules for the budget process with the governor's office. You are given a reduction target that you must hit, the decrement of a cut that you will have to include in your budget. How, if you had to lose 5% of your budget, what would you do in response? That would be the A version. The B version morphed into what we now call a current service or an allocated budget, which is the 1.045 number in that last column. That last column is the equivalent of our current service. There's some acknowledgement in there that they're raising the employer share for health insurance. So we got a little bump in our allocation for that. I think it was 2 million or 3 million. And then anything above that, our wish list is that increment. It's not the total. It's not the 1.045 plus the 570. It's just the 570. They just want to know that amount. So generally, when we're talking in the issue paper and about the budget's request, the 1.045 is a given. That's your base allocation. That's assumed you will get that. It's the 570 million or whatever other amount that's in play that we talk about, we focus on.
So is there, so that if we call that last one, the C level, there's no, that amount that's requested by the agency can be whatever the agency wants. It's
Yes.
not, there's nothing that says you can only request 10% more or 5% more.
Yes,
It's throw it all in there.
correct.
Yeah, and is, okay.
So helping me to, so of the 571, depending on numbers, there's no overlap of that in this request.
Correct.
Now,
There is certain, there is some overlap because some of the items in the 570 appear in the 2024 column. Like the capital renewal funding and the IT support for the 2-year schools. So many of the items, and I tried to note them in the table where it says continue support. Where it was removed from our base and from 24 for 25. So we're asking, just continue to give us the same amount as you have given us in the past.
so and then the overall budget, will there be discussion from the universities or the system wide? Is there anything in the 570 roughly that is more important than what is already appearing in the fiscal year 25 request? I mean, so is there anything we could take out of here and put in from this if we're trying to cut 577 to 253 roughly?
So Regent Dykes, if I'm understanding, would there be something in the 1.045 column that could be foregone? Hey,
Correct.
so I suspect from the university's perspective, that would be no. From our office perspective, those, and I have all the more detail for our office. Most of this page relates to the funding in our office. We wouldn't want to forego any of our financial aid programs, certainly. And we would not want to say, sure, get rid of all the state aid to Washburn University. We wouldn't be proposing that. So I would generally say probably not.
No,
Yeah.
I'm just asking questions.
Yes, absolutely.
What are the to be determined numbers? I mean, that aren't even in the 570.
Mhm. So we can talk about those first, if that is helpful. There are several. One of them is for Pitt State. And I have interpreted that project, it's a joint project with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. And the Kansas Bureau of Investigation is really taking the lead on seeking the funding from the governor legislature for that project. But it's a project that's with Pittsburgh State. And I don't think that they would be seeking funding for their budget necessarily, but in concert, I think the hope was that the board would be endorsing the project as a positive thing.
Go ahead, Doug.
I agree with that 100%. You've really characterized it right. So I think of it more as a kind of a public acknowledgement that we are familiar with, aware of, and completely supportive of the KBI's request. Believe it will bring some benefits that we can leverage at the university for the good of the state.
Is that, would that hold consistent with the KBI building that's on the Washburn campus it was funded by the KBI and not Washburn?
You know, I'm not sure I know the specifics of the funding for that project, but there are some similarities there. The project that's being considered is modeled after that facility in action, just modified to meet the specific needs that exist for them in Pittsburgh.
have any idea when we may have a dollar figure on that?
You know, I don't have a firm idea of that. I know that we're assisting them in gathering data about the needs for that facility and have been helping them have some conversations with firms that actually did the project in Topeka as a reference point. Not sure we know the timeline though.
Okay, all right, thanks, Doug.
Everybody's comfortable with the fact that we just, removed all of the K-State obligations while Ethan was out and balanced the budget.
Ethan probably would not support that, yeah.
I voted against it, by the way.
Yeah.
Just-
It's okay.
Yes,
Here-
Regent Winter.
I promised to.
Seeing if
hurry
you're
through
awake
this.
over there.
So, Elaine, the budget request for this coming year requests approximately $570 million more than this year, about 50%. Do you remember what those numbers were a year ago? How much? Well, so we're requesting 570 more. What was our request a year ago this time?
I'm
And then
pulling
my
that up.
question after that is, that was 500 million. How much was actually appropriated of that 500 million?
I
253.
do have the amounts of what was provided by the legislature. In 2024, the legislature added, with much support from the governor, 219 million above what we had previously. And in 2023, that same number was 162 million plus 243 million of ARPA. If you remember all the ARPA
Mhm,
projects for
mhm.
the public institutions of higher ed. So 162 million, 163 in 2023, 219 in 2024. That gives you the context for the two most recent years of what we were actually provided. I'd have to go back and find the request.
That's fine. But by the way, I'm mostly interested in what's truly base funding.
Mhm.
ARPA was not, in my
Right,
opinion.
right.
So here's my concern, if I can
Certainly.
preface this upcoming discussion. We know that the budget requests in past years that we've made have been funded only half, 50%-ish, 30%. They've been cut down a lot. True?
I would say, I think we're a far higher rate this last year. I think, I almost want to say we had a request last year of 200 some million. And relative to what the legislature gave us, ultimately with much governor support, I would say it's a lot closer than 50,
Okay.
more than 50.
So here's my concern. The request here, let's talk about this year, $570 million, 50% increase. But the concern is that we would be sending this request over, apparently without any prioritization. Is that correct? We're not doing A, B, and C, and our C is 270 million, right?
So when we
Yes.
submit that budget, there is no prioritization on our part. Correct.
As it is now, that is correct. So I would just remind the board of the statutory authority or the responsibility that you have to advocate on the entirety of the system. And there's no requirement that there be a priority, but then you're handing that process to another party. Yes.
And you just had the lead for my comment.
Yes.
What would go, if we just approve this $570 million more, it goes over across the street to the legislature. And I can tell you that many people in the legislature would look at that and say, what are they thinking? $570 million. Let's compare that to the projected increase in state general fund money. And they're going to say, there they go again. The regions have this huge request and there's no prioritization. Now, what happens in reality is one of two things. Either the appropriators led by the chairs of the two committees over there, they make their own decisions. And they decide what the priority is, or they ask the institutions hey, tell me what you really want. What's the most important things? I'm concerned that we're not doing our job by sending over a budget that's $570 million without any indication from us about which of those items are the most important. Is it faculty salary increase funding? Is it research funding? On and on and on and on. So we can't do it now, today or tomorrow. But we could send over our budget request of $570 million and then tell the legislature, we will be sending you a prioritization, A, B, and C. Has that been done by the regents and in recent past?
Well, the thing I would comment on the budget process, it is a cycle that is never ending. And there's never an absolute conclusion to any of this. So it's even before we wrap up the 2025 budget, we're going to be thinking about 2026. So we will
There's a
have
conclusion
next
to
steps.
The appropriation.
There is, but then even still, we have revisions to 2024. They're noted in the issue paper. So we're always cycling into the next sequence, and there's always opportunity for amending or clarifying your initial request. We will be, by state law, we owe the budget division our budget here this month. And universities have already submitted their, because their base, but they're just sending in a base typical B type budget, right? They just submit, and we're the ones who submit the enhancements on behalf of everyone. So there is no reason why we cannot at a later point in time help clarify for the governor and her decision-making and the legislature as we go along what our priorities really are.
And Regent Winter, your concern is well-founded. I think obviously if we didn't pare this down and voice our priorities, then we're not doing our jobs. And we risk the signal that would send to the legislature and the general public that we're not being, we're not looking through these and perusing. I do think our discussion here in this committee is the first step in that. And so I want to make sure that we leave enough time, now 11:15. I want to make sure that we leave enough time for us to ask questions to kind of clarify, to make sure we understand the ask before then we have some conversation around where our priorities should lie. So it's a good introduction to the discussion we're about to have.
And that's all I was interested in. That is a concern of mine. I think that our advocacy is critically important. We have statutory responsibility, but I think our advocacy is muted if we send over a budget request that we know is nowhere close to being that which will be funded. So I think our advocacy is sharpened and clarified if we send over budget request which has tiers of our prioritization. That I won't say anything more. That may be the only one who thinks that. So
It's a healthy process, definitely.
My recollection last year, I mean, this was ongoing and Chairman Rolfe and Vice Chair Ice and as head of this committee they were working it clear till the end of April or May.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, if we can't, if there's no other discussion related to the process or kind of an overview, if we can maybe dive into the specific sectors and specific requests that are before us. You've all received the information, the detail. Thank you so much for that, Elaine. Would you care, Elaine, is there anything that you wanted to mention with either the supplemental request, the 3 supplemental request, before we really dive into the institution request or the system request?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just say 2 of the items, the first 2 are I consider rather technical. One relates to just an error in how legislative staff were calculating the pay plan for state employees. Every agency that has state general fund was shorted about 20% of their funding, and we need to get that corrected. Legislative leadership, the State Finance Council meeting in June assured the governor and executive branch they will be doing that early on in the session. So I do anticipate that will be included in the governor's budget to repair that error. The funding for the biomedical campus project, this is the joint ARPA project for Wichita State and KU Medical Center. And there was a circuit breaker proviso in the budget that said if the legislature spent funding for other things from the ARPA, then this project was reduced, and that did happen. So another restoration of funding needs to happen to make sure that this state support for that project continues. And then we as an agency are seeking some state funding to make sure we can meet our maintenance of effort for our Title II under WIOA adult ed program. So that's more of it's kind of technical as well, to make sure we meet what we need to for that federal program.
That 44 million is not in the 570.
No, it is not. We tend to talk about these things in different fiscal years as distinct and separate. And so these are what we call supplemental requests for the current year. And they are noted in the budget as additions to what's been appropriated. So above the 1.150.
Any other questions from the regents? Any concern about any of those? Again, what I'm going to try to identify is areas of consensus that we can share with the board this afternoon. But any concerns about any of the supplemental requests? Okay. Thank you, Elaine.
Mhm.
All right, let's, Elaine, if we can dive into maybe the system request before we have our institutions come up and answer questions related to their items. Anything you want to add related to the system request?
I would just say the first 5 items are grouped together because they would impact in some way all of our public institutions of higher ed, 2-year schools and 4-year universities. Our nursing initiative also goes to benefit our private schools, our private independent schools. The program that was initiated in 2006 for the nursing initiative, our state funding has been at 1.8 million for all those years. And the healthcare workforce task force from last spring presented to the board in June and recommended increasing that to $10 million for the nursing shortage.
Okay.
The college navigators, this is taking what the community colleges had suggested and making that a more central, I call them a non-denominational navigator who would help go into high schools and help students understand the entire array of options they have, not just for a community college, but a technical college, a 4-year university, whatever it would be. The Diploma Plus pilot program, I think Regent Lane is going to comment on that this afternoon in her report to the board. And the OER, that is really a student affordability option to assist students afford textbooks. And so we would go out and purchase a platform for all of the institutions, all 32, and create a grant fund that gives students free materials for their courses. And with the new high school graduation requirement coming in 2028 for the FAFSA completion, we want to start building an infrastructure for counselors to go around and help with FAFSA completion events, reimbursing them for their travel. The next grouping of items affects all of the public universities. So the state universities plus Washburn. Last year, one thing we kept running into with the legislative process was we had similar items for Washburn to what the state universities were, and there was this constant confusion as to whether Washburn was included or not. So we made every attempt to include them, incorporate them among all the public universities. The need-based aid, we talked about this at the board workshop, getting to a regional average, and you could do that over time. We have had, and you'll see on that the middle section of that page of the $1.0 billion, there's a section there for student financial aid growing from 24 million to 59 million, 61 million. We have had great success with our advocacy for student financial aid, and this would even add to that a bit more. The $9.5 million. This is the National Institute of Student Clearinghouse playbooks. We got 8.5 million for the state universities and $1,037,000. So again, this is one of those items. It shows up in our budget for 2024. We're asking for it to continue in 2025 and have that be recurring until it becomes self-supporting from additional student retention and recruitment.
Do we have a formula about that? How do we know when that happens?
Well, we'll have to create a baseline and try to, I've thought about that math and I'm not sure how we will, but we'll need to figure that out somehow.
I hope we don't forget that, because I'm convinced that ultimately that's what's going to happen. And I think it would help us with public in the legislature if we if we were able to cut or eliminate the public funding because we've been successful.
And I would add to that, how do we measure the ROI? on those
Exactly.
practices?
Yep,
Right.
yep.
Yeah.
We can talk about that amongst our colleagues. Again, the next item is a continuation of the cyber funding for the IT. This includes Washburn and each of the state universities. That is a never ending, I don't want to say black hole, but something like a black hole. You're just going to constantly have to upgrade your network infrastructure and fend off cyber attacks. We also there was a specific request from Regent Lane for information on what are the mandatory inflationary effects for the universities for their general costs. So the universities went through a consistent process of defining for their general use budget. So not their parking enterprise or their student union or the dorms, just their general use budget, what mandatory contracts will be going up either for utilities or other contracts. So that's just under 14 million. Continuing the prior support for the capital renewal initiative. So whether it's 35 million or 50 million, we do hope, and Chad Bristow will be giving you an update later this calendar year on where we stand with our capital renewal initiative and our successes there. Similarly, please continue the investment in the facility demolition. We're now reaching that point where it's getting a little more complex for the universities to just identify a building and taking it down. You're going to have to start moving people, relocating and consolidating. And I call it a three-dimensional Jenga knot that you're having to negotiate with moving people and the effect of relocating people and how that affects their operations. So we have increased that. That has been $10 million the last 2 years. We do have a new research proposal, and I think I've sent you that separate document from the research institutions, but it could be something that any of the public universities apply for, and how it's structured could vary from what you see here as 150 million up front. The state legislature has not tackled R&D as something to be invested in since 2002. So it's been a subject that just hasn't really come up. It's kind of like student financial aid. So it's a proposal that's been put out there to address faculty and staff recruitment and facilities for our research. And the 3 regional institutions also put forth a proposal which is explained in that extra narrative. There's a 1-pager that's sideways. Would be $6 million each to fortify their operations. And also there's the proposal for a small business development center, 3-year pilot to address small business needs in their regions.
So questions from committee members for Elaine related to the system request? Any questions of clarification?
Kind of going back to Went's comments about prioritizing, which of these are really dreams, which are necessities, as far as each line item, and then can the amounts be adjusted from your all's perspective? I mean, is this truly a wish list or a need list? Take one for the team there, Jeff.
I will attempt to speak on our behalf.
You've been elected.
Know that I'm
Yeah.
wrong. I would say those are the kind of keep the lights on and keep moving forward kind of requests. We know we got Oracle contracts going up and Office 360 and insurance policies and electrical costs. We know we're behind on IT and deferred maintenance. So those are, for KU, our requests are really those. You don't see any specific besides the medical center. Those are the ones I would say are our base, keep us going so we can make improvements. And then you'll see the additional requests from the universities for things they need to do also to do that. So I would call those what you should do as a prudent university to keep ahead on cybersecurity, deferred maintenance, cost increases, and need-based aid is really what's driving us all. We're going to need to focus on that, the affordability of higher ed. So I would say that's what we came to a consensus on, is what we would be, if we could get that would help us stay where we are. It doesn't really necessarily move you forward. It keeps you where you are. I don't know if anybody There's a different perspective on that.
Go ahead.
So of that 570 million, roughly what portion of that is a KU?
We're a third roughly of that. probably.
So are you saying that with respect to that third, it's 200 million, that all 200 million of that is keep the lights on money?
Well, it's the list that she just read on what that adds up to.
Now that number is
That's a
about
loss.
315 million.
Take out the 150.
If
out
you
the
take
150.
out page 92, I wrote over that.
Got it.
I would take out the 150 because that's a new initiative for research. That's one we would really need to do to keep our top researchers and not lose them or bring new ones in. But take that one out and that's really what I call what you got to do to.
Okay.
stay where you're-
Thanks.
Maybe something to add, Werner?
Yeah, yes, thank you. Good morning, Regents. One of the things I'd like to add is the second item there, continue prior investment in student success and retention. I will admit, and maybe some of my colleagues as well, is that we thought that was going to be reoccurring money, not one-time money. So we planned and budgeted accordingly. So we certainly have things in place that we did as an institution. I think some of my colleagues as well, because we just assumed retention and student success is more than a one-year item. So we thought it was reoccurring and budgeted accordingly. So, and I echo Jeff's sentiments.
And so in my mind, there are really two sides of each of these requests. There's the technical side and the clarification to make sure we understand it correctly. And then the side about prioritization. So if we can, I'd like for us to maybe delay the prioritization discussion, even as important as it is, just to make sure that we get through all the requests and that we fully understand exactly what you're asking for. So are there any other questions for Elaine related to the system request from a clarification or a technical standpoint? Regent Winter.
Just so you know, I'm not suggesting at all that we try to prioritize today or tomorrow. That if that decision is made by the board to do that, that's going to have to be in the months ahead.
Good point. And Elaine, I just wanted to clarify the concurrent enrollment Diploma Plus pilot program that request has been coordinated with KSDE. There's been conversations with.
There have
PSD.
been, yes.
Okay.
That figure though would be state funding for the two-year colleges. Well, the public institutions, colleges or universities that wanted to do it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Any other questions related to the system-wide request? Okay. Move into the KU Med Center request for the Cancer Center. I know we've got David here that can answer any questions that the regents may have. That was easy enough. Yeah, great job.
Self-evident,
Yeah.
I guess.
Obviously a great project. All right, moving into Kansas State University. Obviously Ethan is here and can answer any questions.
I'm just glad they didn't get all taken away already.
I teach you to step away for a moment. Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's part of my job.
And so Ethan, I just wanted to clarify related to the Ag Innovation Initiative, that $25 million request would leverage $41 million in private and federal funds.
That would be our intent. Yes, would
Okay.
be an additional opportunity to go after multiple sources, philanthropic, federal, all to complete that overarching project, which is multiple facilities for the ag innovation piece. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Do we work with like agencies like MBAF in that area?
Yes, but it'd also probably be specific entities or working with our congressional delegation about how we could, potentially receive some federal directed spending
Mhm.
in those areas.
So can you give me an idea as to what the innovation solutions could be?
The Ag Innovation Project itself,
Mhm.
or, okay, so that's a $208 million multiple facility project that really is transforming our infrastructure that we have at the institution. So it's going to be a new agronomy facility that's going to be located on Kimball Drive. We've got a new multi-purpose, livestock arena that will be facilitating our instructional methodologies for that. And then we have significant both renovations and modernization of our facility called Call Hall, which has a lot of our dairy and dairy processing activities. A lot of the facilities were built in the 60s and don't actually have modern abilities to teach to today's standards. We also have renovations to Weber Hall. So we have dairy on one side, we have meat on the other side. Similar issues for that piece. And then we have our grain science facility that would be located in the middle of that, between those two facilities, that would be a replacement. Overarchingly, the thing that we're doing differently though is instead of it just being, we're going to, build new or renovate and keep programs in place, President Linton has mandated that 30% of that space, overall space, be dedicated to interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary research. So we want to bring in not just departments in the College of Agriculture to work on, particular problems that might be facing the state or the nation. We want to bring in other experts from other colleges so that we can all work and tackle the problems together. So it's a new way of thinking about and tackling these challenges, and that's what the facilities are going to help bring forth for us.
So clearly the ROI is we are going after not just a state problem.
Correct.
Hopefully
Correct.
bigger than that.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And this 280 million that you talked about, the entire facility.
208. Yep.
280. Is that in the 1,145 line item here on the single page, or
So
or is
this
it
would
a
be an additional-
multi-year?
This is a one-time request. It builds upon the prior funding that we have received from the state through the ARPA project, as well as the University Challenge Grant project.
Okay.
Those resources coming together, plus our 3-to-1 match from our philanthropic supporters. Overarchingly, we've raised about 133 million of the 208. And so we're still working to find those additional resources. This would be a component of that, also working then to leverage our further donors and industry and federal friends.
Thank you.
Ethan, I know there's been a little bit of concern related to the $5 million rural education request, that maybe some of that's already occurring through our community college partners. Can you speak to that?
I've not heard of that concern, Regent Benjamin, so I'm not quite sure exactly what the issues might be.
Would this be a duplication of efforts of I guess, efforts that are already occurring?
I think what we would probably say it's expansion. How can we reach additional community college or additional rural areas and provide augmented services to them? We're not trying to compete. We would look at how can we build upon partnerships between the different areas as well. So I would look at it more of how do we provide more services to the rural areas of our state and not whether we're going to be in competition or not.
Thank you.
Can you give us a little more explanation on the 10 million, the Whitewater Institute initiative?
Yeah, so that's part of our new strategic plan. Is one of our opportunity agendas is sustainability. And what we're focusing on there is trying to bring together disparate activities that might be occurring across the state or with different state entities and bring it to a more hyper focus. So water is going to continue to be a challenge for the state. It's a challenge today. We know it's going to continue to be a challenge in the future. And so what we want to do is really bring together and begin that interdisciplinary research, teaching, so that we can bring forth that next generation of water and natural resource professionals. We think this is the #1 challenge for the state of Kansas that we've got to really work on. And we believe we're uniquely positioned to be able to do that. The results of what we are anticipating would be implementation of research-based solutions to address those growing concerns related to water in Kansas, and then potentially then with that global impact as well. It's not a facility. No. Yeah, I would look at this as a potential, not just water, but what other opportunities might come in the future that we could think about doing things differently. So again, instead of just focusing on one particular college that has that niche drive and direction in terms of their research and working to find those solutions, we're looking to see how can we bring more focus and depth, both from our engineering friends, our business friends, our agricultural conservation friends. How can we bring those together to really think differently and more broadly about how do we solve this challenge for the state?
Any other questions for Ethan on the Kansas State request?
Yeah. That's the grand challenge. Yeah.
Great work. All right. Thank you, Ethan. All right, we'll move on to the Emporia State request. Yes, sorry. Oh, Wichita State. Sorry. Sorry, Werner. Yeah. All right. Any questions for Werner related to the request from Wichita State? How was the $10 million number reached?
Yeah, as you can see here, this is core to what we are in our institution, certainly recruiting, retention, affordability, pillar 1, 2 for workforce development, and number 3, certainly economic prosperity and development for the region. And what we looked at is we used our target, our current numbers of about 8,000 students and $28 million. We were looking at enhancing the program by about a third, grow the program by about a third. And so if you back into that number, then it's approximately $10 million. And that would serve about 2,850 students. And this is one, I think the question will come up about phasing. I think you had mentioned that, Regent Benson. And this is one certainly that could be phased. And actually, President Muma offered that in an email to Blake and President Flanders and Regent Ice as well, that perhaps we could do $5 million and then phase it over 2 years.
Certainly phasing is maybe one way that we can address some of these larger items. So thank you. Any other questions for Werner? All right. Thank you, Werner. All right. Now, Diana, if we can have you come up on the Emporia State University request. Any questions for Diana?
I want to go ahead and make a comment because we were actually having this conversation yesterday, President Hush and I, about prioritization of our asks. And he has informed me that he has already spoken to Dr. Flanders and to Regent Ice and Regent Rolfe that we will be withdrawing the request on the ESU model. But the other 3 requests for us are definitely priorities. They are one-time infusions to address some of our critical needs in terms of financing and also relieving some pressure off of our students to make it more affordable for them. And I'm speaking on that one directly to the student affordability, one that has to do with part of the campus activity fee that they pay is to pay debt on the Memorial Union renovation. And so if we can relieve them of that, that will save them approximately over 4 years, $1,000, a little over $1,000 for our full-time students and $1,800 for our part-time students over the life of the debt that's still due until 2030. So, and the other one has to do with debt in our residence hall system on an internal loan, again, to not be in burden ourselves with debt and use some excess cash at the time we did some remodeling. Hoping that, our enrollments were trending up, and as we all know, they're not trending up anymore. And so to take some pressure off of that system, because we now see that as an uncollectible debt, the internal loan pieces to pay that off so that we don't have to think about that in terms of future adjustments to our residence hall students to make that good.
Great information. Any questions for Diana? Yes, Regent Prasker.
Is there any budget items that were already approved that you're evaluating and appreciate, looking at the ESU model? And is there any other areas that you're willing to, reduce on the already existing budget?
So we have several infusions of one-time funds already, like the investment in the ESU model is a one-time investment. So that money will technically go away in 2024. So our base, as you can see by that sheet, falls by at least $10 million. The 9 million of the one-time investment in our ESU model. And then as Warner spoke to, what we were seeing as recurring funds would only be one time for our student retention and recruitment, which is why we feel very strongly about the regional assets being made. That, is not a duplication of the other things that's being requested. It really is to help stabilize us in our local region, because we're very important to our economy, our local economy, as well as the regional economy. And so to gird up our strategic efforts to recruit students, retain them, and also be able to offer them a structure that they can have a vibrant and learning environment.
Okay. Any other questions for Diana? Regent Dykes?
Yeah, this would be Diana and kind of Werner together. On the student affordability retention, are these additional dollars you are looking for that would be in addition to the statewide? When we look at need-based aid and student success and retention that go to the system-wide, I assume you will both get some money from that. Is this additional dollars you need for those areas at your individual university?
For ESU, yes, because as I just explained, the student affordability one is around being able to pay down some debt that is currently being charged back to our students in the campus activity fee. So being able to relieve them of that will also reduce some of their costs because we can remove a portion of the campus activity fee. So that's separate than the need-based aid. And then for us, the student housing debt avoidance, again, a relief to having to pass on some internal loan expense to our students in the future by being able to pay that off as a one-time infusion. So yes, it would be in addition to the system-wide asks for student aid.
Okay.
Oh, you want to be able to answer this question too?
That'd be the same for us. The need-based aid as a system-wide request. We still need that. The applied learning opportunities is a separate model and separate program.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Any other questions? Okay, still got
Thank you.
3 more to go here, so try to move through these fairly quickly as we're already at 11:45. Doug Ball, Pittsburgh State University. Any questions related to the Pittsburgh State budget request? Okay. Hearing none. Great job, Doug. Oh, yeah, you didn't get off that easy. Regent Dykes.
If we didn't do that, then you'd lose that match. And is there a time frame on that match?
So the matching piece of that particular project is an effort we have underway to secure federal funds for that project. And so it is likely that those federal funds, if obtained, would include a matching need. And so we're trying to match up state funds and federal funds to provide a match and do the project in total. Both of those are moving targets. And so hoping to just align those two at approximately the same time.
But if you got the federal and didn't get the state, then you'd lose the
We would
federal.
lose or have to find an alternative.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Doug. All right, Fort Hays State University. We got Wesley Winch that can answer any questions related to the Fort Hays State request. Regents.
I have a question on the nursing side. We do have a line item on the state for the nursing education. So is that in addition? And how is,
It would be in addition to, so, and the $15.4 million ask, 15 million of it is one-time money for a construction of a facility. The 400,000 is for four nursing staff that we would need to staff it. And the request on the state side is nursing in general. That is not quite as specific for the addition to the program that we're talking about here, because the nursing board from the state of Kansas approved our expansion of the program. And so we're going from 65 nurses to 90. And this extra 4 staff in the building is to help with not just the ongoing costs of the existing program, but it's the expansion.
are you able to find any federal funds for that particular,
Federal funds for
the nursing program as such?
we're always looking for federal funds. I don't know that we have been terribly successful in finding a lot of federal funds for the nursing program. But we have in many areas on campus, but I'm not aware of huge dollars for the nursing program.
Okay.
I think we just got, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think we just got approved for about a $500,000 grant for our nursing program this summer.
That's a start. Do we have hospitals there that are requiring that nurses? Or are we producing nurses for the entire state of Kansas?
We are producing for wherever our graduates go. We do have a hospital in Hayes, Hayes Med, and we partner well with Hayes Med. They are a great campus partner, and they use our sim lab, and our nurses go there for training and for their for many of their practicums. But our graduates go many places.
I mean, just looking at others who are doing matching funds from private industry kind of thing. So is that something that you can do? Raise funds to match up what you're looking at?
We can always look, Regent Parasker. I don't know what how successful we would be, but we're always looking for people who are willing to donate for our programs.
I had a quick question related to the nursing request as well. When we heard from the nursing task force a couple of months ago, they stated the big concern was staffing and being able to find nursing instructors. Do you feel confident that if you were able to build this facility, that you would be able to find the professors?
We do, but that is actually a real concern. Often, what happens is that the professors that we're hiring earn less than they could earn in industry. That's just real. They come in at a lower salary than they could earn at the hospital or other places. And so there are challenges with that. But our faculty have been pretty good at finding people. I'm not aware that we have any open positions right now in our nursing department, and they have gone through a process where they allow some flexibility with their work flex from teaching sometimes from a distance and then coming on the days that they need to, and they have expanded the search to Larned and some of these other areas where the nurses are, and because of that. We actually pull from a larger pool than just Hayes for the hiring, and we have been successful in hiring that. That doesn't mean we won't run into challenges, but history often tells you how the future will be, and so far we haven't run into many troubles finding it. But it is a challenge. Sometimes finding them can be a challenge.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions related to the Fort Hays State request?
I just wanted to add the comment on the workforce development education. I like that you're looking at alternative credentials. Good job.
Thank you.
And I also like that you have the mental health, telehealth certifications. That's fantastic.
With our telehealth, that we think that could really be something that could be helpful for our rural communities.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Wesley. All right, Washburn University had a couple of requests. I believe Elaine could answer any questions that we have related to those. Anything related to the Washburn request?
The 15 million. Workforce development, I'm interested in understanding what that is.
I do have some additional narrative from them that I
Yeah.
can provide to you if that's of interest. I can't really necessarily comment other than these are capital projects that they are interested in impacting the Northeast Kansas region.
I just want to understand why can't we work with workforce agencies and bring in that support? So any information there would be great.
Okay. I'll send you what I have.
Any other questions related to the Washburn request? Okay, the Board of Regents office has a couple of requests there that I'm sure Elaine could
Yes.
answer any questions.
Yes, so with the board strategic agenda, and we've been handed some new programs to implement by the legislature, and they disregarded our fiscal note. We do have a request for several key staff people related to our communications team, our academic affairs unit, and our IT development that would be helping us to get all the things done that we have on our list of to-dos. The other item is noted as a TBD, and that is something that arose from conversations with the Department of Administration. As part of the state employee pay plan, other agencies in the executive branch were provided state funding for market adjustments for their employees' pay. We were not included in that, and we are seeking to be included. And we are seeking the same people's assistance who did those market salary surveys to help us with finding out what would that amount look like. And so we've sent them our position descriptions, and they're doing some research for us on that.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. Any questions related to that? Okay, and I believe the remainder of the request are related to the community colleges and tech colleges.
They
Is that
are,
correct?
and they are arrayed by topic with different options where different entities commented or made a proposal. So the first item is career and tech ed capital outlay state aid. That is a statutory program that goes to designated colleges. And the request on this one is, yes, continue to fund the $7 million for the schools that are eligible. But not only that, for those that are not eligible by statute, the 10 schools, please give us $5 million for that. Or the tech colleges are suggesting that they need a little bump in their amount that comes to $525,000. The next three items, the apprenticeship, business industry partnerships, the IT cybersecurity, the tech college of operating grants, those are all items that are in our 2024 budget. And in some fashion, the schools or the tech ed authority want those funds continued to some degree, either the same amount or there's some variety on the IT funding as to how much.
Okay, all right. Any questions from the regents related to the request from the community or technical colleges? Regent Winter.
Back to the point I was attempting to make earlier about prioritization and ranking. Are any of these requests, community college requests, ranked in that way or prioritized?
They were not.
Okay.
They just had their entirety of their listing. And so to try to make it easier for you to see how they rate, we group them in this fashion.
And follow the same format as
Yeah.
the universities.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to clarify the request related to the college navigators that originated in the community college request, but we created a system-wide request.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, any questions related to the community and technical college request? Okay, well, I know we're already over time. It's great conversation and I appreciate that. I know we're going to have a more robust conversation a little bit later this afternoon and also tomorrow morning as well. Any parting comments from any of the regents before we close the meeting? Regent Winter.
Thanks to everybody who's worked to put this together and Elaine and all those.
Anything from the institutions that you feel like we missed or we mischaracterized or anything like that? Yes, Jeff.
Remember, it's not really part of the state budget process. We've already asked for approval to lobby on behalf of KLETC, the Law Enforcement Training Center, for funding that they are requesting, but it's not part of this request. But I just want to make sure that's on the record.
Okay.
We'll be going forward with that as well for some other.
Duly noted. Any others? Wesley, yes.
On that professional workforce development, it says recurring, but it's meant to be recurring for 3 years only, because we're hoping at that point that it funds itself.
Well, for next year, it's definitely there.
And that's on the alternative credentials.
Well,
The alternative credentials, because we're hoping to gain the revenues from that will
Okay.
eventually pay for itself.
Regent.
I want to applaud that. I think it's great anytime we can identify those kind of requests that we expect and plan to have self-funded. That's terrific.
All right, great discussion, great information. I know a lot of conversations have been had and will continue to be had. So with that, we will adjourn the meeting and we'll see you this afternoon. Thanks again.